Hi there, I'm Ken Lammers. This is Commonplace Catholic, and this week we're going to talk about how the elites in our country blame evangelicals for everything that they view as evil, up to and including specifically Donald Trump. Oh, so let's get to it.
Lord Jesus Christ.
युगान युग तेरा ही है.
Ilekroć bowiem sprawujemy pamiątkę ofiary Chrystusa,
Kweli ni vema na haki tukushukuru daima na popote, Bwana Baba mwema.
主の御体と御血になりますように。
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about who the evangelicals are. That's a difficult topic, right? They are approximately 23% of the population in the United States, which means they are the largest religious grouping. Catholics being 19%, the second highest, but evangelicals, it's a bucket. There's a lot of denominations that are thrown in there, and they're thrown in there because they're similar in beliefs, right? But they would tell you that they're different. You've got Baptists, Independents, non-denominationals, different groups that are in there, and what really kind of hangs them all together is the fact that they're conservative, right? This is the haven for those who have been kicked out of the mainline Protestant churches, which ain't mainline anymore because they've kicked all their conservative members out and moved extremely left to where people ain't coming to church no more, right? Most recently, United Methodist. I know after whatever happened in their church, suddenly all of the United Methodist churches around here became something else, mostly non-denominational. So that's where your conservative Protestants are thrown into that bucket, so that's there. Loose group, hard to pin down exactly what everybody believes in there, but they are the conservative Protestants. Now, what brought this topic to me was an email I got from my undergrad college. My undergrad college sends out an email every once in a while. This student's just doing this wonderful thing. That student's doing this wonderful thing. And, this is what we're doing on the college. Sometimes a little disturbing. And then they, at the bottom this time, they had, look, you can watch this thing. We're going to be broadcasting these for 4 weeks about what is Christian nationalism. And they've left out, but if you read the description further, it is about white Christian nationalism. And what they mean by that is the evangelicals, right? And so they're going to have this for 4 weeks. And on Thursday night, I will tell you that the one on April 2nd is disturbing because that's Maundy Thursday or Holy Thursday, and people should be in church rather than going to this seminar. But, it gives you a point of view of where they're coming from, who's holding this. And I shan't be watching it because while they will let me pay $48 and I can go watch it in person, it's a 3.5-hour drive each way. Not going to happen. Or I can watch it on Zoom for $48 for the 4 weeks. But during Lent, I give up video entertainment, and this would be entertainment because I would be watching this to see how the elites, misunderstand and blame evangelicals for everything they don't like, right? And I got to tell you, when I first saw this, one of the first thoughts that ran through my mind is, they're still running with that, right? This is something that came out. I mean, I didn't think the meme was entirely dead. I saw when they were after Hegseth for having a Jerusalem cross, and I went, yeah, it means you're Catholic, generally. And more specifically, it's supposed to mean you're a Catholic who's gone to the Holy Land. Um, I don't know whether he has or not, but it white Christian nationalist, really? But generally, that meme has died. It has exhausted itself, or I thought it had until this came up. Now, um, where does all this come from? This Christian evangelicals are the evil, the bane, the root of everything. Is comes out of the 2016 race, presidential race. We know you had Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and everybody in the elite knew that Hillary Clinton was going to win. The media, the academia, the bureaucracy, they just all knew that Hillary was going to be the next president. We were going to have our first female president. Um, and, she's running against this clown who's a TV personality, right? And so the night of, when he wins, and they went in shock. And instead of turning the mirror to themselves to go, holy cow, why did the great mass of working class people, middle class people, lower class people, everybody turn against us? And why did the hoi polloi not vote in the person we told them to vote in? Instead of looking at that, and there are reasons, Hillary Clinton very well could have won this if she'd run a good campaign. You can find things dissecting her campaign. It was amazingly bad. They acted like they were going to win from the beginning, just doing victory laps right out of the gate. She never went to Wisconsin, a state she had to win. Michigan, she killed the ground game in Michigan, right? Basically assumed a victory there. Assumed a victory in both of those. And Trump, while he had a more limited campaign, knew where he had to win, and where she was calling them deplorables, he was saying, you're deplorables, I'm deplorable, we're in this together. And it worked. And Trump wins. But rather than seeing that, they start flailing around for excuses, how to look through a lens and blame others. The first thing I saw of this was a guy on mainstream media, what we called mainstream media at the time, I guess we would call legacy media now. And there's like 6 people up on the stage, and they just realized that Trump is going to be president. And they are, every single man and woman of them, in shock. They're just in shock. You can tell they don't know what to say. They don't know how to react. They had all walked into the studio that morning knowing that Hillary Clinton was going to be president after this election. And one guy just out of nowhere turns and goes, I guess America's racist. And I remember almost just screaming at the TV, you can't be that clueless. This is the, middle class, working class, and below telling the elites, go bleep yourself, right? It was a class election, not all these other things they were trying to throw. Of course, they didn't go there. They start dissecting. First, there's all the Russiagate stuff. Everybody knows that that's been thoroughly debunked, although there are still some people out there, diehards who seem to semi-believe it at least. I'm going to leave that alone. But concurrently with the Russiagate stuff came the evangelicals are evil and cost us the election. The problem, of course, is while this makes a great story, it does not track. Evangelicals had voted for McCain at 78%, for Romney at 77%, and they voted in 2016 for Trump at 78%. So, he got the same amount of votes from evangelicals as the last 2 guys who'd run for president as Republicans. Now, mind you, Hillary Clinton got 3 to 4% less than the Democratic candidate for the last 2 elections, who was Obama. good gravy. You're shocked that she got less than Obama. Um, an amazing campaigner for his time, right? And so the evangelical thing is an interesting story, but it shouldn't have really had legs. But boy, howdy did it. And, you know, it's lived ever since, I thought, and is apparently stronger than I thought it was. Now, here's what they're going to do on the first week. I'm not going to go through every week of their thing. The first week, from the beginning in the United States, Protestant Christianity thought of itself as the predominant religion culture of the American nation. Duh. It was, right? In the 20th century, as Christian culture came to include Catholics, thanks for including us, and mainline Protestants became more progressive and smaller and smaller and smaller denominations as they threw more and more and more conservatives out. Um, Conservative Protestants came to think of themselves as an embattled minority in their own land. Duh. After the Civil Rights Movement and the Sexual Revolution, conservative political forces shaped white evangelicals into a political movement that emphasized social hierarchies of gender and implicitly race. By 2016, it wasn't race. I mean, I'm sure there were people upon whom race was an important thing, but that wasn't it. And I'm sure there were some people who the hierarchy thing, but that ain't the reason she lost, right? So what they're going to rely on in this one is a book called Drawing on Jesus and John Wayne, How White Evangelicals Corrupted a Faith and Fractured a Nation. This is from a professor, kind of a minor professor named Christian Cobes Demez, whose other book that she's written, the only other book she's written, is some sort of feminist spin on the Bible. So I looked at the book that they're going to base this on. Now, mind you, for this 1 hour course, they suggest that you read this 368 page book. Yes, 368 page. I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of reading Apologia Pro Vita Sua. I'm probably going to read Orthodoxy next, maybe a little way. But, you know, there are better and more important books to read than this. This was the popular notion among the elite so you could sell books book, right? If you look on Amazon, you will find 10 or 12 easy, the same thing, right? Evangelicals are evil. They're white nationalists. They hate all of you, and they voted evil Trump into office, right? You can find these easily. But apparently hers, at least per the professors here, is a step above the others. And her book is Jesus and John Wayne, How White Evangelicals Corrupted a Faith and Fractured a Nation. They didn't, by the way. They may have corrupted a faith. As Catholic, I think they're off base. Did they fracture a nation? No, they didn't. As I showed before, they voted the same amount to Trump as they had the others before him. She is doing this, dialectic thing, right? She's taking males who clearly are evil, and she has a list of them. And between her book description and some reviews I read of this book, it's Teddy Roosevelt, Ronald Reagan, John Wayne, Oliver North, Mel Gibson, and the Duck Dynasty guys. While she muddies this at the end, it's pretty clear from the beginning that what she's against are strong-willed males who believe what they believe and will act on what they believe in a moral manner. That's evil, right? And then she has the other one, which is evangelicalism, that's evil, right? And this isn't like your typical dialectic thing, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. No, this is unrelated, all evil, right? I went through this and looked to see what these guys were like if they were evangelical movers and shakers that had drawn into this movement. And found Teddy Roosevelt, Dutch Reformed; Ronald Reagan, Disciples of Christ; John Wayne, raised Presbyterian, lived a life that really wasn't very Christian at all, although he married 3 Catholic women. All his kids were raised Catholic, and at the end of his life, he was baptized Catholic before he died. I didn't know that until I did the research for this. Oliver North, raised Catholic, Episcopalian as an adult. Mel Gibson, a sedevacantist. You've got to be kidding. This is a guy, him and his church, who reject the Pope and all, would probably hold an inquisition and start burning people in the stake that were in the evangelical movement, right? And then you get the Duck Dynasty guys. I don't know anybody that lives their life according to what Duck Dynasty says, or Mel Gibson either, for that matter. So the Duck Dynasty guys do appear to be evangelical. Go to some megachurch somewhere, right? And so none of these, except for the Duck Dynasty folks, well past really what the 2016 election, none of these were evangelicals leading the evangelical movement. And that was a commentary, actually, that was made in several reviews I read. I read reviews. Of course, I didn't read a whole lot of the reviews were like, yes, this is wonderful confirmation bias. And I love it because it's confirmation bias. I went past those reviews, mainly secular and or leftist, Protestant reviews, and tried to read things from the evangelical community. There's some really thoughtful ones out there. Some are a little bit shallow, but some really thoughtful ones out there that talked about how, yeah, the stuff she points at is wrong, right? Things that went wrong have gone wrong in the evangelical church. They had nothing to do with these guys. Nothing to do with these guys. They had, they can homegrown their own error, right? And, they talk about how she hits those hard and goes through those, but then she ignores the other things around them that balance it out. And she goes after theology that's taught among evangelicals, but she ignores broader theology around it, right? So she's clearly writing a screed, right? This is a hit piece. And she doesn't like males. She doesn't like evangelicals. Boom. She's going to blame what's wrong with evangelicals on the males, on strong males archetypes. It doesn't work. And a priori, I don't buy her the thing of these strong males are evil. I don't necessarily buy her a priori that the evangelicals are evil. They're wrong, right? I mean, I'm Catholic. In my head, they're wrong. They could do well to become Catholic and become closer to God, Christ, and the Holy Spirit, but they're not evil per se in their beliefs. I don't know. They're all over the place. It's hard to pin down exactly what their beliefs are at times. So, but it doesn't track at all. Her thesis doesn't track. Her synthesis doesn't track. So it's a bad book to be based upon. And, I do not recommend going and buying this book. I don't think it's worth the money. I did not spend the money. I'm not going to read it, as I said before. So there you have where this comes from, right? The loss in 2016, the shock that the elites faced from that loss, and this was kind of their comfort food. Oh, we're going to blame it on those evil evangelicals. They're clearly white Christian nationalist types, right? They're all evil. And, now, to be clear, in any group, you can find people that are off kilter and bad. You can. They're out there. There are bad Catholics. There are bad Protestants. in any denomination. Bad Jews, bad Muslims, bad everything. But it's not the vast majority as this portrays it as. And, here's why I thought this whole thing was really dead. Was because in 2024, religious people everywhere went for Trump. White evangelical Protestants, 81%, just like they had before. Well, they had in 2020, they went to 81% too. A natural reaction to being told, look, you idiot, it's your fault. You're evil for having voted for Trump. You go and vote for Trump again because bleep you, and you take a buddy, right? So it went up 3% in 2020 and stayed up 3% in 2024. And the Democrats stayed at about 17% normal. Hispanic Protestants voted for Trump 63%. White Catholics voted for Trump 60%. White non-evangelical Protestants, mainline Protestants, voted for Trump 57%. It's not until you get to Hispanic Catholics where Trump got only 43, got less than 50% of the vote at 43, and that was an improvement by, I think, of like 10 or 11% over what it had been previously, right? And then you go through, other religions of unaffiliated Jewish. They always include Jewish. It's a 2% part of the population. While it has an outsized influence, I don't think that their numbers, they should have Mormons in there too if they've got Jewish, right? But they don't. And then black Protestants, who went up to 13%. I think that was up 3 or 4% voting for him that time. And that is just a reflection at 13% of African Americans, for some reason, will not leave the Democratic Party. No matter how poorly they're treated and taken for granted, they're staying. And I guess that's something to kind of admire. But this here shows you that, in general, religious folks went with Trump in 2024, and it wasn't the evil evangelicals that moved him. If anything, over time, between the Trump election, Biden election, and the Trump election again, and I've not studied this deeply, but what there appear to be hints of are the Catholics may have moved the election, right? And in 2020, they may have moved more towards Biden. And then in 2024, gone, oh, that was a mistake, and moved towards Trump, right? So that's just where it is. I thought this meme was dead primarily because of this, because most people of faith voted for Trump in 24. It may be right or wrong, but they voted for him. It wasn't the evangelicals who won this for him. It wasn't the evangelicals who won it for him in the first race. They gave him, in 2016, they gave him the same votes he would have got that any generic Republican would have gotten. So blaming them for all the evils is misplaced and wrong. I personally would like to see evangelicals brought more in line and brought closer to what I think where actual salvation is in the church, right? The Catholic Church. They would of course disagree with me on this, but and there is a fair number of evangelicals that are moving into Catholicism. It's kind of an ongoing thing, right? I'm sure there's some Catholics moving the other way, but people fall off. But there seems to be prominent people who are evangelicals moving to Catholicism. It's kind of the John Henry Newman thing, right? Once you study the history of the church, you realize it's Catholic, right? And they start realizing that and end up in the Catholic Church, right? I would like them to move that direction. A lot of them move that direction. Out of just, it would be the best thing I think for their souls. But that's not what these people, the elites, are going after. They just don't like the fact that the hoi polloi won't vote the way they want them to, or didn't vote the way they wanted them to, and, you know, started blaming them when they shouldn't have got the blame. Okay, so that little bit of babbling on my part is my opinion about this. As I've said every time, there is no imprimatur here. Nobody from the lowest deacon to the Pope himself has given any approval to any of my ramblings today. And beyond that, if you like what you saw, hit like and subscribe and the bell and all that sort of stuff. Until next time, and who knows when that'll be, next time I run across an interesting topic, go forth with God and the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Have a good day now.